so I'm about to pass it over to Kate, but real quick, just wanted to say, if you're not already familiar with Kate, you're almost certainly familiar with their work. Dr. Kate Compton is a generative artist, inventor, programmer, and teacher. She generated planets for Spore and like flora and fauna and stuff like that as well. Made Tracery, which ran 200,000 community-made bots on Twitter, rest in peace Twitter, and invented the first phone-based AR. Her longtime personal mission is to bring small, playful forms of AI, poets, artists, kids, and weirdos, and we are very lucky to have her even in ASMR mode today, so let's welcome her.
All right, thanks. And one of the things that's very hard about casual creativity is how do you give people permission? And we'll see how long my voice lasts. How do you give people permission to be creative? So can everybody try to interact with the board? Okay, so feel free to wander around the board as I'm talking. There's going to be some areas that we invite you to kind of ideate together. You're welcome to do that. You're welcome to scribble around. You're welcome to kind of leave messages or questions, or these are a lot of ideas in progress. So I'm really happy to have any like questions or just thoughts as they pop up anywhere that you want to leave them. It's not vandalism, it's collage. All right. So as mentioned, I do a lot of different tools. And one of my issues is, as we're looking at Gen AI, what is my role? Is my role still how to teach people how to use Tracery, which is still useful? Is it to give people ways to think about things? I think my role that I most loved was getting people to feel comfortably creative and getting to people to take community creativity and casual creativity seriously as a beautiful form of human expression. So I've been thinking a lot recently about, as mentioned, like rip Twitter, rip all those bots that lived. We're losing ownership, or it feels like we're losing ownership of a lot of different infrastructure that we used to have. So, you know, if we felt the early web, you felt like you owned a little piece of it. But now you feel like you have a little tiny window on somebody else's space. So sometimes some of us are capable of making our own websites, but we feel like the world is kind of getting crushed down and down and down, and you have less and less control. You're not building your own infrastructure. I live in Denmark now, where infrastructure is controlled by local communities. So we have a civic rat catcher guy. We have lots of civic stuff. And I gave this presentation to my local art center and said, hey, why do we have a library? Why do we have local community hospitals? We don't have a local community, and we have local community streets, but we don't have a local community social network. Why is that part of the infrastructure owned by somebody in America? So I'm kind of thinking about what are ways that we can take back either community control, local control, fuck up weirdo control, lab control of things that we care about and places that we create. So this is kind of the goal of the talk. So speedrun casual creators. And then, so if anybody has not heard casual creators, we'll go through that real quick. But then talk about infrastructure and what do I mean by that? And talk about how do people make casual infrastructure? What does that mean? Are you doing your own electricity? I've noticed some really cool patterns. I love finding patterns because those are often easy for people to pick up. And then with those patterns, can we do anything with AI? Like, what forms of AI that we have now or in the past 20 years of AIIDE that work really well with these patterns, that we can kind of take back some control. And control is, maybe you'll see, a little different than ownership. Often, I've been using the metaphor of making a secret fortress in somebody else's basement. You can create infrastructure in stuff you don't own. It's precarious, but you can build it. So, Cheapbots Done Quick was infrastructure running on somebody else's infrastructure. So, ways to kind of, even without ownership, take control. All right. So, speedrun of casual creators. Has anybody not heard of casual creators? Okay, I see we're being assigned well. So yeah, the TLDR is, and many of you have probably seen versions of this talk. I really wanted to know, with the same team working on Spore, what it sometimes made things that people felt made them really comfortable creatively, and others that made incredibly talented people feel like they were just trash idiot babies. That's really fascinating, right? It wasn't a different team, it wasn't a different process, same people. So I got my PhD in trying to solve that. Creativity always requires talking about, well, like, what do you mean about creativity? I'm excited about expressive creativity, which is, again, I like to kind of swear just to kind of keep it casual, but like, fuck around creativity. It's okay. It's not about the problem. It's not about the object. If you know the term useful and, wait, what is it? Novel and useful from ICCC, that's not what we're talking about here. Many of the things I make creatively are neither novel nor useful, but they bring me joy. That was the loudest sound I've made in a really long time. So yeah, one of the neat things is, if you look at this kind of what stops people from being creative, you recognize that it's an awareness of social judgment. And you don't actually develop that skill until you're about 8 or 12 years old. So you are very creatively free as a very small child, unless you've lived a very bad life, because you don't perceive yourself being creative as a thing that other people can perceive. So you're in this wonderful world where you're just making stuff because it feels good. But then when we develop this self-awareness, that becomes the largest blocker to being creative, which is great, because then you just remove that. And yeah, what you can do is, if you realize that your problem is this creative disgust, you can build a lot of systems that help people get around it in some clever ways. That's what a lot of my casual creative work has been about. I've given you a nice example here. So I have a creative post-it here. Now this is on screen, so a lot of people are trying to think about how to be creative and just clenching really hard. And now you're looking at all the other post-its like, shit, I'm not as creative as that one. Wait, can I do something weirder? Can I find a good emoji? Can I do something like intellectual? Can I like call out a paper? But hey, an emoji, sure. And then the last one I like because it's about personal expression. So it's like, oh, not only an emoji that's about me. I don't have to win against everyone else. I just have to, I own this territory. This is my territory. So I feel safe here. Y'all are doing so great, by the way. Affirmation is an important part of casual creator design. So yeah, there's a lot of creative blockers, and I really love Inside Out because it gives me figures to put to a lot of these ideas. And a lot of these are fears. So Art and Fear is a famous book on why people aren't creative or what stops them. And when I looked closer at it over the years, I realized that these are fears that anticipate disgust. I'm not afraid of being hurt. I'm not afraid of fire. I'm afraid, when I think about creative fear, like if you're about to post something online or you're about to give your talk, is anybody nervous about giving a talk later in this program? You're thinking about, you're afraid of somebody else perceiving you. So these are kind of anticipation of disgust. we don't have to invent these from scratch. We've got solutions. So this is like all of Bob Ross's work is about. Bob Ross is a system. Bob Ross is a casual creator system. It's a bunch of mantras. They're about, oh, I've done something wrong. No, I've done something rightly wrong. So giving yourselves things to catch yourself in the moment of disgust, they give you protection. They give you like a sense that you're doing it right. And there's, in fact, like lots of other casual creator systems, digital and non-digital, that do this. During the pandemic, well, we're still in the pandemic, but during high pandemic, I got really into this of realizing that these were also about social interaction. So if you have a Zoom party, or if you go to a real life party, all these same fears, all these same anticipations of disgust are also what affect us in social situations. So we're totally using monkeys. We've made tools to deal with this, like tabletop role-playing games. So tabletop role-playing games are something where you know that you're going to socialize correctly. You have a list of ways to socialize correctly. You have a list of correct options to do. When you're creative, you have a list of ways you could be creative. You can always go outside this. It won't stop you. But you know that you have a yes. So this kind of, you often see this. There's a right answer. Yes. I can stop there. I did great. I won. If I want to show off, there's no roof. I can go above. If I feel stuck, there's something on the paper. I never have a blank piece of paper. So I found that these were like really cool during the pandemic. And as you can see during this keynote, I really love making them and I love experimenting with them. And you can experiment them in very casual ways. So it's like, okay, that's great. We're feeling good about building casual creators for art, for social, for all kinds of stuff. So what now? And like I've continued to do research on a bunch of like casual creator patterns. There's a whole bunch of other work that's like drilling deeper into casual creators and like weird ways you can build them and make people feel anonymous or make creations for strangers. But it seemed like a good time to start talking about infrastructure. Because again, this was a big missing part that I could talk about all these creators, and it's like as long as you put them on itch.io, you're fine. But a lot of us aren't creating our own casual creators. A lot of us are in all sorts of different kinds of societies online. So this is one of my favorite genres of casual creator. If you ever have to make an installation for a museum and you don't want to do anything digital, I love these. If your community art center is ever like, hey, can you make an installation for us? Or I want to like experiment with some play. Having one of these cumulative creators. So yeah, you can kind of browse around these. This one is a giant inflatable helium ball with graphite nubs on it. So as you pat this ball around, it draws on the walls. You're not winning this. Or maybe you've already won. It doesn't matter. There's no winning here. There's no fear here. You're not going to, unless you deflate the ball, you're doing this right. This is Yayoi Kusama. Do you feel like you can do this art? Like, do you feel like you could put stickers on the walls of the MoMA? Like, you could in this because she's giving you a space that says, yeah, you're doing this. But more importantly, probably the first person to put this sticker was a little nervous. The 10,000th sticker, you get a lot of them. But also notice what's not happening here. It's pretty hard to do dodgy shit here. Like you could make hateful stuff with the dots, but you'd have to work really hard. And probably somebody would just put more dots over it. So a lot of these are kind of about anonymity. Like when you go to a soccer game or a hockey game and you wear the colors, you're just one really small part in a very large part. And that makes you really comfortable because you don't have to be a cheerleader. You're just a pixel. You're a happy pixel and a happy piece of art. but you're just a pixel and it's really low stress. If you ever go to Copenhagen, this is a nice one. These are leaving post-its of things that make you happy. So it's the Copenhagen Museum of Happiness. And you see them kind of accumulate. So it's like art through accumulation. I find this to be a really cool kind of infrastructure. There's the infrastructure of making this room, but there's the infrastructure of just saying, hey, we're making a pile together. So just we're making a pile together is a really strong form of infrastructure that anybody can put together. This is not something where you have to run a Mastodon instance. So as I'm talking about infrastructures, I'd like to talk about what I mean. And I'm gonna, let's see, do I have a time? Oh, good, yeah. I was just seeing where the number was. Deep break. So yeah, I like this definition of infrastructure from Shannon Mattern, which is it makes human settlement possible. So I know settlement is a bit loaded, so I'm kind of adding society as a replacement. But what are the things that make it possible to have a city with people? You've got to have a little bit of like personal space. Got to have a me. This is my yard, my storefront. If we were all just like sharing the same space, it wouldn't feel like a society. But also, ways for us to talk together, ways for us to connect. If I want to live next to you, that should be possible. If I want to call somebody across the town, that should be possible. If we all want to share something, that should be possible. Maybe sometimes we want to have collective things, like we want to have a library. So, okay, we're going to have a bunch of resources that we all have in common. Like, what are all the things that make hanging out creatively with a large group of people possible? And again, you can look at real life for what do cities have that you don't think about? Or what do research labs, like, what is your lab infrastructure if you have a lab space? Like, what are the things that make it possible to have 10 people in an academic room with no windows? So yeah, I'm kind of curious about like, all right, when we're doing this to support casual creativity, or I guess there's two things. One is infrastructure to support casual creativity. So maybe, I made tracery, VBug and Ant made GPUs done quick. GPUs done quick was great infrastructure, and tracery was infrastructure. And that allowed a whole bunch of people to make really great casual creator bots. But I don't think the GPUs done quick itself was like a casual thing, although more so than it could have been, because they didn't have to build their own Twitter. So each of us kind of building on top of each other. But there's also like, what are casual ways that people make infrastructure? And I will talk a little bit about that too. All right, so folk infrastructures. Again, I'm trying to figure out what my future work is. I also work at an employer that like is very protective about what I talk about. So I have to find stuff that's like well outside of corporate life to talk about. And so I've started talking about like these kind of collective ownership, individual ownership things, like very anti-corp stuff. And it's about like non-specialist building. And this is what I would kind of sum it up as. And you'll see this little blue box a lot, because this is the goal. It's not how we get there, but it's where we want to be with a folk infrastructure. That somebody feels like they can build here, like they've got permission. The permission is important because a lot of times you have the ability, but you don't feel like you have the permission, or you don't feel like you have the ability to do it badly. Does anybody run their own Mastodon instance? No one? Does anybody run their own Discord channel? Yeah, like what's the difference? I mean, that's a real question though, right? What's the difference? Why isn't a Mastodon instance like a pick an icon and then go? We've chosen to make that really complicated. You'll also see a couple of like common threads here for folk infrastructure, which again is all about safety. What makes you feel comfortable? Like you're not going to screw it up. You're not going to create something wrong because the threshold is low. You're all doing great at this talk. I didn't ask you for important thoughts. I asked you for scribbles, and you're doing so good. And we're getting a happy pile. Like you don't feel like you have to carry it. You're just putting something on the pile. And if you compare this with something, for some people, the thresholds are different. So Darius Kazemi has a great talk called Platform is Shitpost. Sorry, Infrastructure is Shitpost. For him, a Mastodon instance is casual. So he casually made a Mastodon instance for Dolphin Town, where you can only post the letter E as a reaction to Ulipo, where you can post anything but E. So he was able to make something where it's like, okay, I'm gonna make a weird little, I'm gonna make a weird little village and invite everybody to have weird little lives in my weird little village. And it's okay. That was like a day's work for him. But for others of us, it's harder. I think it's orthogonal to open source. Like often we think about open source as when I talk about like, oh, we should own our own infrastructure. That may mean open source, but it may mean just taking over unprotected channels that aren't watching for us building infrastructure there. Lots of useful stuff gets done on Discord, and if Discord falls in the future, as so many networks do, we will pack up and move and go somewhere else. So yeah, I do like to think about this for open source because open source is a great community infrastructure project. But often when we think about open source, we think about the code. And the code, if you contribute code to open source, it is, maybe you feel like you can, maybe you feel like you may, maybe you feel like there's something you want to add. But this one of, I can't mess anybody else up. I feel like I might mess somebody's code up. I'm likely to mess somebody's code up. There's also a weird like declarative versus imperative here. Imperative code often is easy to fuck up. Like one thing goes wrong in imperative code and everything is, you can't have a happy pile in imperative code. Certain paradigms just don't work with the happy pile. But declarative stuff is very happy pile amenable. This is why the Sims, all the objects in the Sims are little Lua snippets. But the reason that the Sims can go for like 20 years is because it is each designer is making a single little element on the pile, and any particular Sims object can't break any other Sims object. And if you add in modders can add to the pile, but it's still a happy pile. Nobody can break anything. You can, but it's like, it's harder to break things than it is to not break things. And so yeah, when you think about open source contribution, or contributing to any of the projects in your lab, think about all the things that are a pile, that are kind of open, like open folk infrastructure. Posting a tutorial for your lab stuff on Twitter is folk infrastructure. Tracery is almost entirely folk infrastructure. I made this much repo, which I never maintain. Fortunately, it's mostly bug-free, but like this much repo. And then the world made this much stuff on Twitter, on their own blog pages, on their own department sites, in their own languages, in their own communities. Tracery is an infrastructure run by other people, totally independent of me. The only thing that makes it a cohesive infrastructure is we're all using the same like format. So sometimes a folk infrastructure is just a format. And I'm really inspired by, like, I was around for the early web. Some of us in this room were, some of us in the room weren't. There was a time when the web was a happy pile. It was designed to be a happy pile. I'm reading a really great book right now called The Modem Age. And it's about alternatives to the internet, and almost all of them are folk infrastructure, like CB radio, where you could just join and you could talk. Technically, you're supposed to have a license, nobody did, but you could just contribute. So I see there kind of a pattern in a lot of these where it often starts with, all right, somebody builds the big I infrastructure. So W3C builds whatever infrastructure, Mozilla, Firefox builds things. But then you get a bunch of hobbyists actually making the stuff, making the pile. The pile's what people go there for. The pile is the town, the pile is the society. But once the pile starts getting big enough, people start capturing it back down. So they say, oh, you're working really hard on all that folk stuff. Let me give you some tools. Let me give you some stuff to make it more convenient. Let me build you infrastructure on top of that so that now you can use my infrastructure. Don't worry, it's free. And it starts getting captured down, and then they lock the doors. So I think there's kind of watching this flow of how do you gain back some of the work in the margins, even though it's less convenient. You keep the convenient stuff, but maybe you still have something that's inconvenient. And I do like that we, even on top of this, people build casual infrastructure. I think web rings are a really great example. Does anybody remember web rings? Yeah, like 3 people. Good on you. This was a way that people could add to their webpage that they wanted to be part of a collective. It was very chaotic, and it was self-organized and did not work that great, but you could self-organize it with almost no technical ability. So that meant that people could make their own weird little subway systems through the internet. We still have that in some ways, but you can watch it being built on other things. And again, that was infrastructure built on top of other people's infrastructure. Web rings were not a web standard. It was just a weird thing. Like hashtags. Hashtags were not part of the original infrastructure of Twitter. We made them up. And then they became part of the infrastructure. And now they're taking them back. So they're often like actually like Instagram and X are removing hashtags because this is a form of infrastructure that they don't control as easily. So these kinds of ephemeral folk infrastructures are very precarious, but very flexible. You can make up new stuff. You can use them badly. All right. Oh, good. Perfect time. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about patterns for folk infrastructure. So again, it's always kind of going back here. Like, this is where we want to get to, but how do we get there? Like, it's great to think, oh, people are going to feel good and creatively comfortable using my new social network, or weird, like, I'm going to make something where people can like make their own level generators and share them. I'm going to make something where like I'll have a cool academic project for a speedrunning community with new level randomizers, and people share them and do all this stuff. But like, and you want all these things. Well, how are you going to get there? So this is one of my favorite patterns. And kind of at the core of this talk, I was looking at all these things that are infrastructure that makes casual creativity possible. So you have mixtapes, and you have mix CDs, and you have Spotify playlists, but you don't have mix records because we didn't have the infrastructure to make your own. When I was talking to people about mixtapes, I never made a mixtape. I made a lot of mix CDs. People were telling me about how hard it was to make a mixtape. It's like you had to have your sister who had the special recorder, borrow time from her, time things. It was a lot of effort, but it was still possible. And so it was like what infrastructure makes. And then a tape itself is a cool kind of infrastructure because I can give you a tape. I still have my mixed CDs. They probably don't play anymore because the CDs degrade. But even if the tape doesn't play, I still have all the art on the front. I can give it to people. I can hide it places. I can send to people. Spotify playlists are also a form of infrastructure. But now I've lost the control, so I can't keep the Spotify playlist in my drawer for the grandkids to find. Maybe, probably. it's unlikely that Spotify is going to be around in like 60 years. At least not that link. And definitely not the songs on it. Like, Spotify playlists themselves are ephemeral because the licensing goes away. So I noticed with a whole bunch of these that they're kind of forms of collage. So I think that collage is a really strong thing. If you want to deep dive into some weird stuff, these are Victorian collages. They would cut up and like how precious were photos and images in the Victorian era. You can't just get them. You like have to buy magazines. You have to make photos. They're quite expensive, but they would still cut them up, collage them, put them together, and send them to each other. All right, why would you do that? Like, why wouldn't you just write a dang letter? Why wouldn't you just use a postcard? And it's because, like, look at this. This is somebody who's made a Bellagio hand out of their friends. They're taking something that has meaning to them, these kind of semantic components, and they're recombining them. So the fact that you're not collaging colors, you're not collaging shapes, you're collaging images, you're collaging icons, you're collaging tropes. You're shaping them to formats. It's like a poker hand. There's a bunch of other, like, I'm making little dollhouses. There's some like really bizarre ones in some of these links. It's this idea that like, hey, I can make something bigger and more meaningful than I thought, and I'm expressing ownership over it. Like, I can collage all the people that I hate into something. And again, this kind of reframing, like, there's a thing that is powerful and important and semiotically meaningful, and I get to take it and put a wrapper around it. This is what we do with retweets. Retweets are a really important part of folk infrastructure, because you're saying, hey, this thing, now I'm putting a frame around it. I'm pointing at it and having an opinion, and my opinion is in the front. So it's kind of like these ways of people making stuff out of stuff. Tea break. So yeah, like collage and email. Second tea break. So yeah, collage and cumulative creators. As I'm looking through these are like two of the kind of strong patterns I'm finding. But I'm finding some kind of common, I don't know if they're patterns or meta patterns or enablers. These seem to be, they're not in everything, but they're very strongly linked. So fuck up friendly, semantic components. You could say like mistake friendly, but I like the alliteration. And then it makes it harder for y'all to cite me. And semantic components and kind of this sendable, packageable, giftable. And you can see that these are kind of attacking the things that are stopping you from doing this. Like, I can't screw this up. If other people screw it up, that's also okay. Because they can't. There's something that I want to build. I have particularly niche anime, and I need to build something with my particular weird ship, and my particular favorite emoji, and my weird OC name, and like combine all that together with my favorite game tropes. And that's very compelling because now also I want to send that to somebody. I can make something just for me. We find a really strong draw for people creatively is sending people things to others. When Sheepot's Done Quick died, I hadn't realized how many of the bots that it made were not for public consumption. Like they were on Twitter, but nobody ever linked to them. They were weird gifts from one person to another. They were just like, I have this niche anime, and you love this niche anime, and I'm gonna make something just for you, just about us. This is our mixtape. So these sort of like mixtapes as one-to-one communication. But also I might want to say like, hey, I want to collect all of my favorite mixtapes, or I want to collect all of my favorite Twitter bots. I can send you a link to somebody else's Twitter bot. And that means that I've turned this generative space, this Twitter bot, I've turned it into an object that I can pass around a link. So yeah, more tea break, thank you. I won't talk a lot about this one because I'm still kind of exploring it, but like a lot of who here teaches programming? Anyone teach programming, intro programming? Yeah, a couple folks. Do you ever sit with a student the moment that they get their first error message and they want to quit the class because the computer's yelling at them? And you have to explain, no, this is the computer just expressing its needs. It's not judging you. This is normal. But that's sort of like, it kills people, right? That moment of, I've done it wrong. I don't deserve to be here. I'm just going to screw it up. So how do you make something where either that's part of it or it's softened? You'll often get things like Scratch is really great creative infrastructure, made by a team of very capable people, but it's made so that 8-year-olds can run their own GitHub, so that you can grab another 8-year-old's game, modify it, change it. How often do they put like semantically meaningful stuff? They'll put their memes in it. But Scratch, importantly, has no errors. It has bugs, sure, but it'll never tell you you're wrong. It'll never stop. It's the difference between stop and, that's like stop and surprising new output. It's like, that's okay. It's okay that it didn't do that thing. It's doing a different thing. That thing is not what I wanted and maybe terrible, but it's doing a different thing. It's not stopped. And again, HTML is a great example of this. You cannot break HTML in any way that matters. Like, you can take an HTML page and just randomly delete large sections of it, and it will still render. There's nothing you can do to stop an HTML page from rendering except very carefully crafting a crashing loop. And that's what made the internet possible. If we had to write correct web pages, we would not have made the internet, because every web page is incorrect in some way. Tracery, I very accidentally made it fuck-up friendly. I didn't realize I was doing this, but I said, I'm just going to have behavior that doesn't crash when you have missing symbols. So many of our academic things, it's like, when the user has fully, perfectly completed their thing, then I will run. Then no one will ever use your thing because people are very imperfect. So making a trash pile for trash little people is actually a really important part. So semantic components, also I think fairly self-explanatory. It needs a better name if anybody has one. I don't know, something that's like catchy. It doesn't have to have swears in it. But emoji are like kind of the big one of that. What does everything use emoji? Emoji are like the smallest nugget of semantic meaning. We saw this with a lot of great Twitter bots. There's this emoji DNA Twitter bot, and it just picked out 2 random emoji. And somebody would say like, swords and computers, finally my gender. It's like, I just picked out 2 random emoji. How do you get like seen from 2 random emoji? But people felt seen from 2 random emoji. You get really powerful juxtaposition for this. If you're into Emily Short's ontology, this is a lot about Venom. It's kind of semantically 2 things that contrast, have kind of a big space in between them. You don't get a big space between like a number and another number, but you do between 2 semantic things. So it tends to be very generative. And again, that lets people kind of have something they wanted to build and something that they really wanted to share with somebody else. And again, like things that you were excited to post in here. You didn't post an empty post-it note. You didn't post like a number. You posted things that you thought were funny from culture. This is one of my favorite ones. And I think one that we kind of forget about, because of course we can send links and we forget what links are. Links are a promise. Links are a way of saying, hey, I'm going to give you something, a piece of data, and that's a promise that you can get to another thing. We found that those aren't always accurate. So all the links to Twitter bots are now gone. Links to things die. There's plenty of those QR code necklaces that lead to dead sites. But at least a link can be an object that kind of makes something pass aroundable. You can do lots of really cool stuff with that. If you move things to the physical world, you have access to physical infrastructure. If I want everybody at a conference to see something, I can put it on the conference Discord, or I can put it next to the cookies. I love zines. Zines are, the history of zines is women making weird, awkward, semiotically meaningful gifts about Kirk and Spock kissing, and then giving them to each other. And they're a way of saying, you can't stop me from making this. Like, you won't host it, you won't put it on the show itself, but you can't stop me. Also, you can't stop me from sharing. You can't stop me from holding this. You can't stop me from giving it. If you can't stop me from giving it, you can't stop this scene. You can't stop the society. This is unstoppable infrastructure. Here, have one. So, I love scenes academically for many ways. Okay, I can give you something. How often do you actually follow up on a link that somebody gives you to their paper? Versus if you have a zine, you are now physically holding a thing that's a reminder. But also zines, nobody can stop you from publishing a zine. If your paper gets rejected, bring a zine. Flyer the zines, they can't stop the signal. Give them to other grad students. So a lot of my better ideas have been published in zines when I couldn't get them into conferences. Similar to a blog, but again, it's a physical thing. Also, now this is an object that I can turn into a shelf of favorite memories. So I love zine walls in academic spaces. Again, you're occupying space. You can use other infrastructure. The most important part of zine wall infrastructure is the microwave. You put your zine wall next to the microwave because the microwave is a promise that people are going to stand there for 2 minutes and not know what to do with themselves, and they will read your zines in 2 minutes. So yeah, kind of occupying space that you don't have permission to occupy otherwise. Spore was a really great example of this. We didn't do this intentionally, but I forget who thought it was clever, but we saved all the creature information into a PNG in the transparent pixels. So your save file is just a PNG with steganographic information. That's cute. So now we didn't have to have a separate save file format, and all your save files had a pretty picture on your hard drive. But if you can drag them into our game, you can drag them elsewhere. We don't own PNGs. Everyone can take PNGs. So literally anywhere else that took PNGs became a Sporepedia. And something awful became the evil Negaverse Sporepedia. So this is the only non-terrible image on that whole thing. But it supports that freedom. So infrastructure supports the good stuff and the bad stuff. It also removed all the bad stuff from Sporepedia. People didn't actually want to be pissing in our river. They wanted their own piss town. It's fine. They wanted to be impressing each other. They wanted to have their own town. If we made them live in our town, they would have made problems. But they could make their own town. Yeah, this is exceeding my expectations. I should have sudden medical issues more often. Also, you can try this with your classes now, if this works. So I want to talk a little bit about AI, because this is an AI conference. So again, this kind of what are ways that AI intersects with folk infrastructure? Because AI, we can think of okay, there's giant models There's things like DeepSeek. DeepSeek is a move for folk infrastructure. It's at least moving in that direction, saying, hey, you could own this, you could run this. It's still Mastodon level of this is somebody really patient spending a couple of weekends trying to get this running. But once they have it running, they might run it for their friends. So sometimes you have the like in your community, maybe you have the technical person running stuff for the slightly less technical person, making stuff for the slightly less technical person. So this was a couple of patterns that I found fun. These are 2 parametric generators. This one is a scarf project. I actually did bring some of these with me, but not today. So if anybody wants to have a scarf, I made these with a parametric generator and then I printed them out. This is cool infrastructure on Spoonflower. That means that for $3, I can give somebody a generative scarf. And it feels unique and strange and kind of special, especially back in like 2014. Now it's less so, which is why I'm kind of like closing the project. But it allowed me to play some fun games. So I could have all of my stuff in a big pile in front of me. I could say, hey, do you want one of these physical things? And then when I give him this physical thing, it felt special. I could say, hey, this is one physical thing. The game that I play is you have to trade me something for the scarf. But it's a casual creator game, so literally everything is accepted. So I've gotten a rock, a packet of hot sauce, hand-knitted scarves, 2 hand-knitted scarves now, pile of art books, offer of drugs. I declined a dollar bill. So yeah, that's the game. But I could only play that game once I turned. I couldn't play that game before. I wouldn't play that game with a link. I had to turn it into a physical object so I could use physical infrastructure. This is very similar, but kind of more live generative. This is Bleep Track. If people know Bleep Track, amazing generative artist. They did this great project where they have NFC stickers. So they have a parametric generator. Each one of these is a link. So it's an image that's a thumbnail of a link of a particular generator. And then they'll give these out. Or you could buy them, or they'll hide them places. So now you have things that are like hidden around. So they'll hide them in elevators. So if you find this, you found a generator, which I think is neat. There's like an AI, but now I've turned that AI into lots of little collective landmarks, and I've turned those little collective landmarks into objects in the world. And then it takes you to the live ones, so you can then explore like the full space. I see M. Charity has been here. I really love Max Bicker's River because it's a vector embedding. So vector embedding is you've got some giant cube, like 512 dimensional cube, and each artwork in ArenaNet is a landmark somewhere in that cube. And you can kind of, it's fun to browse. You can click on an artwork. So if you need to waste time today, definitely go to the river. You click on an artwork, you see a bunch of artwork around it. And you can browse, kind of click on the next one, and you're kind of moving through that space. Taking a little 512 dimensional tour through art. It's also adaptable if you have any giant pile of any kind of data. You can play the same tricks. You can make a river out of literally any other kind of data. But they also did it, so it's like that's kind of browse mode. But they also did a cool thing, which is saying, hey, each of those places you've been to is a URL. So now if I find, as I'm wandering, I find someplace, suddenly I can turn that into a teleportation gate, basically, and hand you the teleportation. I can like give people portals. And of course people are now collecting it back on Arena. So yeah, like one final example, just because I'm break. And you need to have your students put that in all your slides. I was trying to find other examples. I think with like modern Gen AI, I think Glyph is one of the few ones that I've really liked so far. This is again, it's kind of riffing on that Scratch. How do you make casual GitHub? How do you make something so that the kind of true moves of GitHub. I'm going to make a program. I'm going to upload my program. I'm going to share my program. I'm going to let you run my program. I'm going to let you copy my program. I'm going to see who's copying my program and what they're making with it. How do you make those the smallest moves possible so that anybody feels like they're doing it right? Because you feel like you're doing GitHub wrong a lot, or at least I feel like I'm doing GitHub wrong. So Glyph is trying to do that with generative pipelines, and I think they're doing an okay job. I think one of the ways you can see that they're doing an okay job is that people upload all of their workflows. And as a symptom, you see that somebody cares deeply about something. Somebody had a particular kind of bullshit that they needed to share with the world. The more you see very particular niche weird people doing stuff, the more you know it's kind of getting those effects. Wow, I'm really gonna end with zero voice. So yeah. So I think I will end it here then, of when we think about these patterns and all of the different tools that we use. Are there any of our things that are helpful with a pile? Like grammars seem like they work well in a pile. I'm part of a class right now that's making an Inkle collaborative group city, because Inkle, it also works really well as a pile. But I'm trying to find examples of which of these things intersect in different ways. Like maybe a pathfinding agent is not a good collective infrastructure, but maybe if we all contribute to the maps, they are. Or if we had something where we could all make different ones and then share them. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it here as just kind of an invitation, and thank you so much for your time and patience, and energy and creativity and permission. And yeah, invite you to think about how would you make anything that we talk here a form of infrastructure that could be picked up by people around you.